The bullies thought he was just another victim until they crossed the line and faced his deadly secret. Marcus Delacroix kept his head down as he walked through the main corridor of Westfield High, his worn leather messenger bag clutched tightly against his chest. At 17, he stood barely 5'6" with a lean frame that made him appear younger than his years. His dark hair fell across his forehead, partially obscuring the quiet intelligence in his brown eyes. 3 months had passed since his family moved from Montreal to this small Pennsylvania town, and Marcus still felt like an outsider navigating unfamiliar territory. The hallways buzzed with typical teenage energy, but Marcus moved through it, like a ghost. His accent, subtle but noticeable, marked him as different. His preference for solitude and his habit of reading during lunch made him an easy target. What none of his classmates knew was that Marcus had spent the last 8 years training in mixed martial arts under some of the most respected instructors in Quebec. His father, a former military officer, had insisted on the training after Marcus was hospitalized following a brutal attack when he was 9. The discipline, the control, the lethal precision, it was all there, hidden beneath his quiet exterior. But Marcus had made a promise to his mother after their move. No more fighting, no more violence. She had seen too much of what her son was capable of, and it terrified her. Violence only breeds more violence, she had whispered through tears after Marcus had put 3 teenagers in the hospital back in Montreal. He had agreed to change, to find another way. That resolve was tested daily by Tyler Brennan and his crew. Tyler stood 6'2" with the broad shoulders of someone who spent hours in the weight room. His sandy hair was always perfectly styled, and his green eyes held a cruel intelligence that made him particularly dangerous. He ruled Westfield High through intimidation and had immediately identified Marcus as prey. Jake Morrison served as Tyler's lieutenant, shorter but stockier, with a face that seemed permanently twisted into a sneer. The third member of their group was Danny Walsh, lanky and nervous, who participated more out of fear than genuine malice. Together, they had turned Marcus's life into a daily gauntlet of humiliation. It started small, shoulder checks in the hallway that sent Marcus stumbling into lockers, accidentally knocking his books from his hands, whispered comments about his accent, calling him Frenchy and refugee. Marcus endured it all in silence, his jaw clenched but his hands never raised. The cafeteria became a particular battleground. Westfield High's lunchroom stretched across half the school's main building, filled with long tables that created natural territories for different social groups. Marcus always sat alone at a small table near the windows, hoping to remain invisible, but Tyler's crew had other plans. "Hey, Frenchie," Tyler called out one Tuesday afternoon, his voice carrying across the crowded space. "You gonna eat that? Whole sandwich? Or are you saving some for your mama back in Canada?" Laughter rippled through nearby tables. Marcus continued eating, his eyes fixed on his book, but his knuckles had gone white around his sandwich. "Control," he reminded himself. "Mother's right. Violence isn't the answer." Jake stepped closer, his shadow falling across Marcus's table. "Tyler's talking to you, foreign boy. It's rude not to answer." "Leave me alone," Marcus said quietly, his accent more pronounced under stress. "Ooh, he speaks." Danny laughed nervously. "What's that book about anyway? How to Surrender in French?" The joke fell flat, but Tyler picked up the book anyway, flipping through pages with exaggerated interest. "Advanced Physics," he read aloud. "Jesus, Frenchie, no wonder you don't have any friends. You read this boring shit for fun?" Marcus reached for the book, but Tyler held it high above his head. "Give it back," Marcus said, his voice steady despite the rage building in his chest. "Make me," Tyler grinned, then deliberately dropped the book into Marcus's chocolate milk. The liquid splashed across the table, soaking into Marcus's notebook and dripping onto his jeans. The cafeteria had gone quiet, dozens of eyes watching the confrontation. Mrs. Patterson, the lunch monitor, was conveniently looking the other way, absorbed in her phone. Marcus stared at his ruined belongings, his breathing carefully controlled. "This is exactly what they want," he thought. "They want me to lose control." Instead, Marcus calmly retrieved his soggy book and began cleaning up the mess. Tyler's crew laughed and walked away, disappointed by the lack of reaction. But Marcus had seen something in Tyler's eyes that worried him. The satisfaction wasn't complete. The bully wanted more. The incidents escalated over the following weeks. In gym class, Marcus found his clothes cut up in his locker. Walking to his car after school, he discovered all 4 tires slashed. The school administration remained frustratingly indifferent, treating each incident as isolated pranks rather than systematic harassment. "Boys will be boys," Principal Davidson had said with a dismissive wave when Marcus's father came to file a complaint. Marcus needs to learn to fit in better. Maybe if he participated more in school activities. Marcus's father had left the meeting furious, but Marcus convinced him not to escalate further. I can handle this, he had said, though privately he wondered how much more he could take. The breaking point came on a Thursday morning in Mrs. Rodriguez's advanced biology class. She was young, probably in her late 20s, with long, dark hair and a passion for teaching that made her popular with students. She wore a modest knee-length skirt and blouse, professional but flattering. Marcus had always appreciated her kindness. She was one of the few teachers who seemed to genuinely care about his adjustment to the new school. The classroom occupied the second floor of the science building, with large windows overlooking the parking lot. Mrs. Rodriguez was at the front of the room, writing chemical formulas on the whiteboard, when Tyler made his move. "Check this out," Tyler whispered to Jake, who sat 2 rows behind Marcus. "Bet she's wearing something interesting under that skirt." Marcus felt his stomach tighten. He had learned to recognize that tone in Tyler's voice, the predatory satisfaction that preceded his worst behavior. Mrs. Rodriguez had her back turned, reaching up to write on the higher portion of the board. Tyler stood slowly, making exaggerated quiet gestures to his friends. Several students noticed but said nothing, their eyes wide with anticipation and horror. Tyler crept forward, his phone already out and recording. Jake followed, grinning stupidly. Danny remained seated, looking uncomfortable but unwilling to intervene. Do something, Marcus thought desperately. But what? If he called out, he'd only draw Tyler's attention back to himself. If he stayed quiet, Mrs. Rodriguez would be humiliated. Tyler reached the front of the classroom and slowly extended his hand toward the hem of Mrs. Rodriguez's skirt. The room held its collective breath. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Mrs. Rodriguez had turned around just as Tyler's fingers brushed the fabric. Her voice cut through the classroom like a whip, her usual gentleness replaced by blazing fury. Tyler froze, his hand still extended, his phone still recording. You were just sexually harassing your teacher," Mrs. Rodriguez said, her voice deadly quiet. "Give me that phone, now." "I don't think so," Tyler smirked, recovering his composure. "You can't prove anything. Besides, what are you going to do about it? You're just a teacher." That was his mistake. Mrs. Rodriguez moved with lightning speed, her hand shooting out to grab Tyler's wrist. The phone went flying, clattering across the floor. Tyler tried to pull away but found himself held in an iron grip. "Let go of me, you crazy—" Mrs. Rodriguez twisted Tyler's arm behind his back and drove him face first into the nearest desk. The impact echoed through the silent classroom. Tyler cried out in pain and surprise. "Anyone else want to try something?" she asked conversationally. Her knee pressed into Tyler's back as he writhed helplessly. "Jake? You were filming too, weren't you?" Jake had gone pale, his own phone trembling in his hands. "I wasn't. We were just—" Mrs. Rodriguez released Tyler, who stumbled backward, clutching his arm. Her eyes were blazing with righteous anger. "All 3 of you out of my classroom. Now. And don't even think about coming back until you've learned to treat women with respect." Tyler's face was flushed with humiliation and rage. The entire class had witnessed his defeat at the hands of a woman half his size. As he gathered his scattered belongings, his eyes found Marcus. "This is your fault somehow," he hissed under his breath. "After school, Frenchie, parking lot, you and me." Marcus felt something shift inside his chest. The careful control he had maintained for months began to crack. Tyler's threat wasn't just about him anymore. Mrs. Rodriguez had stood up for herself, shown real courage, and now Tyler wanted to take his humiliation out on the one person he thought couldn't fight back. He's wrong about that. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Marcus found it difficult to concentrate on his classes, his mind racing through possibilities and consequences. He could skip the confrontation, leave school early, or ask for a ride. He could report Tyler's threat to the administration, though their track record suggested little would be done. Or he could finally show Tyler Brennan exactly who he was dealing with. When the final bell rang, Marcus didn't head for the exits with the rest of the student body. Instead, he made his way to his locker, moving with deliberate calm. He removed his heavy textbooks, leaving only his notebook and pen. His movements felt different now, more fluid and purposeful. The change was subtle but noticeable to anyone paying attention. Sarah Martinez, a quiet girl from his chemistry class, stopped at the locker next to his. "Marcus," she said hesitantly, "Tyler and his friends are waiting outside. Maybe you should call your parents or something?" Marcus looked at her, really looked at her for the first time. She had kind eyes and seemed genuinely concerned. "Thank you," he said simply, "but I think it's time I handled this myself." Sarah frowned. "What do you mean?" "Marcus, Tyler's huge. He'll hurt you." A small smile played at the corners of Marcus's mouth. "I don't think so." He walked through the school's main corridors one last time as a victim. Students moved past him in the usual after-school rush, but several had heard about Tyler's threat. Word traveled fast in a small school, and a crowd was already gathering outside. The parking lot stretched behind the main building, bordered by a chain-link fence and overlooked by the gymnasium windows. It was the traditional spot for settling disputes, far enough from the main offices to avoid immediate administrative intervention, but visible enough to ensure witnesses. Tyler waited near the center of the lot, Jake and Danny flanking him. A crowd of perhaps 30 students had formed a loose circle, maintaining enough distance to scatter if teachers appeared but close enough to see everything. Marcus spotted Mrs. Rodriguez's car still in the faculty lot and wondered if she knew what was about to happen. "There he is," Tyler called out as Marcus approached. "The little French coward who hides behind women." Marcus walked steadily forward, his hands loose at his sides. His breathing was controlled, his mind clear. 8 years of training had taught him to find calm in the center of chaos. "You humiliated me today, Frenchie," Tyler continued, his voice getting louder for the benefit of their audience. "Made me look weak in front of everyone. That was a mistake." Marcus stopped about 10 feet away, well within striking distance for both of them. "I didn't do anything to you, Tyler. You humiliated yourself." Tyler's face darkened. "Smart mouth. Let's see how smart you are when I'm done with you." He lunged forward, throwing a wild haymaker aimed at Marcus's head. It was exactly the kind of sloppy, telegraphed attack that Marcus had learned to counter in his first month of training. Marcus slipped the punch with minimal movement, letting Tyler's momentum carry him forward. As the bigger boy stumbled past, Marcus drove an elbow into his kidney. Tyler gasped and staggered, pain shooting through his lower back. The crowd fell silent. That hadn't looked like luck. Tyler spun around, his face twisted with rage and confusion. "Lucky shot," he snarled, but his voice lacked conviction. He came again, this time more cautiously, throwing a series of jabs. Marcus moved like water, each punch sliding past him harmlessly. He could have ended it then, could have dropped Tyler with any number of devastating counters. Instead, he let the bully exhaust himself, demonstrating the futility of his attacks. Jake, seeing his leader struggling, tried to intervene. He rushed at Marcus from the side, hoping to catch him off guard. Marcus's response was swift and brutal. He caught Jake's charging form with a perfectly timed hip toss, using the boy's own momentum to send him crashing to the asphalt. Jake rolled twice and came to rest against a parked car, groaning in pain. "Stay down," Marcus said quietly, his eyes never leaving Tyler. Danny took one look at his friends and backed away, his hands raised. "I'm out," he said quickly. "This is between you two." Tyler was breathing hard now, sweat beading on his forehead. For the first time, genuine fear flickered in his eyes. This wasn't going according to plan. "What the hell are you?" he gasped. Marcus began to circle, his movements predatory and controlled. "I'm someone who's been very patient with you, Tyler. Someone who's given you every chance to leave me alone. Someone whose mother made him promise not to hurt people." Tyler threw another punch, desperation making him sloppy. Marcus caught his wrist, twisted, and drove his knee into Tyler's solar plexus. The bigger boy doubled over, retching. "But you couldn't leave it alone, could you?" Marcus continued conversationally, maintaining his grip on Tyler's arm. "You had to keep pushing, had to humiliate Mrs. Rodriguez, had to threaten me." He twisted Tyler's arm further, applying pressure to the shoulder joint. Tyler cried out, dropping to one knee. "I've been training in mixed martial arts since I was 9 years old," Marcus said, his voice carrying clearly across the silent parking lot. "Brazilian jiu-jitsu, Muay Thai, boxing, wrestling, 8 years, 6 days a week, 3 hours a day. I've competed in tournaments across Canada and the northern United States. I've never lost a match." Tyler's eyes were wide with terror now, finally understanding the magnitude of his mistake. "The last 3 boys who tried to bully me ended up in the hospital," Marcus continued. "One had a broken jaw, one had 3 cracked ribs. The third had a dislocated shoulder and a concussion. That's why my family moved here. That's why I promised my mother I wouldn't fight anymore." He released Tyler's arm and stepped back. Tyler collapsed fully to the ground, clutching his shoulder and gasping for breath. "But you had to push," Marcus said, his voice heavy with disappointment. "You couldn't just leave me alone. You had to involve Mrs. Rodriguez. You had to make it personal." Tyler struggled to his feet, his face pale and defeated. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I didn't know. I'll leave you alone, I swear." Marcus studied him for a long moment. Around them, the crowd watched in fascination and fear. This quiet kid, this victim they had watched being tormented for months, had just dismantled the school's most feared bully without breaking a sweat. "You're not sorry yet," Marcus said finally. "But you will be." He moved with explosive speed, his fist connecting with Tyler's jaw in a perfect right cross. The impact echoed across the parking lot like a gunshot. Tyler's head snapped back, his eyes rolled up, and he collapsed unconscious to the asphalt. The crowd erupted in shocked whispers and nervous laughter. Jake was still groaning against the car, holding his ribs. Danny had disappeared entirely. Tyler lay motionless, a thin trickle of blood running from his split lip. Marcus stood over his fallen tormentor, breathing steadily. He felt no satisfaction, no triumph, only a deep sadness that it had come to this. "Is he dead?" someone whispered from the crowd. Marcus knelt and checked Tyler's pulse, strong and steady. "He's fine," he called out. "Just unconscious. He'll wake up in a few minutes, with a headache and a lesson." He stood and faced the watching students. "Anyone else have a problem with me?" he asked quietly. The crowd began to disperse quickly, students hurrying away to spread the word about what they had witnessed. Within minutes, only a handful remained. Sarah Martinez approached hesitantly. "Marcus, are you okay?" He looked at her, this kind girl who had tried to warn him. "I'm fine," he said, "but I'm not the same person I was this morning." Tyler began to stir, groaning softly. Marcus helped him sit up, ignoring the boy's instinctive flinch. "Listen to me carefully," Marcus said, his voice gentle but firm. "This ends here. No retaliation, no revenge, no more bullying anyone. You're going to leave me alone. You're going to leave everyone else alone. And you're going to remember this feeling the next time you think about picking on someone smaller than you." Tyler nodded weakly, unable to meet Marcus's eyes. "And Tyler," Marcus added, "if I hear about you bothering Mrs. Rodriguez or any other teacher, if I hear about you harassing any other students, we'll have this conversation again. Except next time I won't be so gentle." By Monday morning, the story had spread throughout Westfield High like wildfire. Marcus arrived to find students watching him with a mixture of awe and fear. The quiet kid, the victim, had become something else entirely, returned to school with a bruised jaw and a dramatically altered attitude. He avoided Marcus completely, kept his head down in classes, and seemed to have lost his appetite for confrontation. Jake and Danny followed his lead. Their crew effectively disbanded. Mrs. Rodriguez found Marcus before first period. "I heard—" "What happened?" she said quietly. "Thank you for standing up for me." "You stood up for yourself," Marcus replied. "I just finished what you started." She smiled. "Still, I appreciate it. And Marcus, if you ever need someone to talk to about what you can do, I'm here." Marcus nodded gratefully. It was good to know he wasn't completely alone. The changes were immediate and profound. Students who had never acknowledged his existence now nodded respectfully in the hallways. Teachers treated him with new consideration. The invisible barrier that had surrounded him for months had shattered completely. But perhaps the most significant change was in Marcus himself. He no longer kept his head down or tried to remain invisible. He walked with quiet confidence, secure in the knowledge that he could handle whatever came his way. The promise to his mother still held. He wouldn't seek out violence or become what he hated. But he would never again allow himself to be anyone's victim. 3 weeks later, Tyler approached him after school. Marcus tensed, ready for anything, but Tyler's posture was submissive, defeated. "I wanted to apologize," Tyler said quietly. "Really apologize. What I did to Mrs. Rodriguez, what I did to you, it was wrong. I was wrong." Marcus studied the bigger boy's face, looking for signs of deception. He found only genuine remorse. "Apology accepted," Marcus said finally. "But Tyler, this doesn't make us friends. This just makes us even." Tyler nodded. "I understand. And Marcus, I'm not the only one who learned something that day. Half the school saw what happens when you push someone too far. You probably prevented a lot of other kids from getting hurt." As Tyler walked away, Marcus reflected on the truth in those words. Sometimes violence wasn't the answer, but sometimes it was the only language bullies understood. The key was knowing when to use it and when to walk away. His mother had been right about violence breeding violence, but she had also been wrong about something else. Sometimes, a single act of justified force could prevent far more violence down the road. Marcus Delacroix had found his balance at last.